here is Andrew Zarian's bottom half of this.
I would love to see a remake to Fiddler on the Roof with Chris Jericho, but he has to embrace the role. It can't just be Chris Jericho.
He's got to be Tevye the Jericho.
Yes. I mean, the walls of Jericho, right? It kind of goes hand in hand.
That's fair. If I were the champion.
Fantastic.
You're writing this whole script right now, Joel. Like you get music credit for this when AEW gets nominated for an Emmy for this segment.
Finally, God, talk about wrestling and Emmys. Hey, Andrew Zarian, you went to SmackDown at Madison Square Garden.
I did. I was there. I was. It was a surprise, actually. I went to Lion King. Since you're talking about Broadway and musicals, I was at Broadway. I went to go see Lion King with the kids, and I texted somebody from there, and I was like, "Hey, I'm like, any chance you got?" Because I had such a great time, and the kids were loving it. I'm like, "You got any extra tickets for SmackDown?" They're like, "You're killing me. How many do you need?" I'm like, 4. They go, "Oh my God." I heard the oy vey come from the other side. He didn't even have to say it. I heard it. And they hooked me up with some really sweet tickets. They got me in a suite, and I was hanging out with Mike Johnson all night, which was fun. First time I've engaged with him ever. We were talking about Flushing Queens and the Mets. No wrestling, just about the Mets mostly. And my kids had a freaking blast. It was an awesome show. They were packed. The Garden was slammed.
That's wild. And of course, they did the traditional stage for SmackDown. They didn't do the PLE, pre-PLE stage where they kind of
And I found out why. I that was the first thing I said. I actually, the way I said it, I was like, what's wrong? I'm like, you guys are fools. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you guys are fools. I'm like, you could have sold another 4,000 tickets at least for this show, because it was a hot commodity, and you could tell how hot it was. Those secondhand market tickets. The nosebleeds were selling for $1.75. I mean, the worst upper deck seats were selling for $1.75 on Friday morning. He's like, actually, we thought about it multiple times. We had this conversation. The problem was the early ticket sales didn't move as quickly. So they couldn't make the adjustment, because even if they had adjusted, 2 weeks out, how many more tickets were they going to sell? 1,000? Is it worth it for that? No, not really, because then you're going to have an entire section that's empty. It really came down to early ticket sales, but I was told that this is a plan now for the Garden and other key buildings, that if the ticket sales shoot out the door, they're able to sell, let's say they do it for 13,000 and they're at 10 already, they'll open up the second half.
They'll do that classic entranceway with the big double door.
I don't know if they can. They
redid the Garden, right? They
redid it. Yeah, they redid the Garden, so I don't know if it's possible anymore.
If they could, they would do a throwback SmackDown in a second and just sell out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, but they could have, I don't know. Could they have put 16,000, 17,000 in this building with, what they had presented? I don't know. I think it just so happened that it's Manhattan, it's New York City, it's a Friday night, it's middle of July. There was a lot of action happening. Manhattan was bumping that night. Every venue was slammed. I'm there all the time, but it felt like a really busy night, and I think they benefited from it. The show looked great. There was barely any wrestling, and nobody cared in that building. Nobody cared.
I mean,
go ahead, Jeremy.
The fact that it was still the highest grossing MSG event when they had less seats than usual because of the big stage setup. And they've held Manias, SummerSlam, they've held their top events at that venue. And this was still the high. And I know inflation over the years and everything, but it's clearly a hot product, and they didn't even, they could have gotten more money out of it, but it was still the highest grossing SmackDown, or it was the highest grossing domestic SmackDown ever, but still the highest grossing MSG event ever when they've held their big events there.
I mean, if you really think about it, when is the last mega event that they held that had over 13,000 people there? Really, it's been a long time. They've been struggling with the Garden. 2021, when they came back from that pandemic, they only had 8,000, 9,000 people in that building. The second time, remember, that was that big, I forgot which show it was. Joel and Jeremy, you guys might remember. But they were struggling at 7,000 tickets. And at the last minute, obviously, they pumped it, and the marketing wise, they were able to get it at 9,000. But it was hard. 18 months ago. We're not even talking distant past.
That was I believe the Raw that also had AEW running UBS around the same week. That was maybe December of last year.
It could have been, yeah. It could have been, yeah. So I mean, it's hot. It's hot, and a lot of kids, a lot of LWO shirts, a lot of LA Knight is probably their hottest babyface right now, which is wild to think about. Outside of the Bloodline stuff, take away the Bloodline stuff. Super hot. He wasn't even on the show. He was on the pre-show. Showed up, did a little thing, with I think Top Dollar, and that was it.
Do you think he should have been featured more prominently on the show this week, or
on this show? 100%, and I think it would have been an elevator for him. I was thinking about that yesterday when we were doing Observer Live. If he was presented on that show, I think it would have been another key moment for him as far as getting elevated, because that building wanted him. They really, really wanted him. And the last time I was at the Garden in March, it was the same exact thing. He came out and they erupted for him. And it's kids reacting. And that's the important thing here. Forget about us. Like, I'm not even talking about us reacting. I see the comments, and it's always an older person saying, like, oh, Steve Austin and it's The Rock. He's doing Steve Austin. Fine, that's great. But you know what? Does it really matter? Because these 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, these 9-year-old kids, they're going berserk for him.
Hear me out.
So there's something.
Hear me out on LA Knight. So I'm looking at the YouTube numbers, and the LA Knight segment, which was SmackDown exclusive, 1 million views. The only other thing, the entire Bloodline start to finish thing that they put a big video for, it did 2.3 million. Just the final segment with Jey Uso is at 924, and then even the Tribal Court segment is at 665. Everything else below 500, even below 400. The women's segment's actually 518, but 1 million for LA Knight. Here's what you do with LA Knight. Just social media exclusive LA Knight. You can only see this man if you go to the arena to see the segment, and then it's online only. And then when he finally appears on TV, he gets the big pop. That's what they're doing with him. That's my theory with LA Knight.
I hope they have a plan for him, because I don't, naturally it doesn't happen too often that a guy naturally gets over and they're able to elevate. They always have an excuse on why they can't push. Bryan Danielson was one. We heard every excuse in the book. Damian Sandow was another one. I'm not comparing LA Knight to Damian Sandow. I know that there's some comparison there, but he was another one. He got over naturally, and they just didn't know what to do with him. Dolph Ziggler was another one, with so many pushes. It's something that WWE is not good at, and that's pivoting with a natural change in their plans. I think for LA Knight, this has been brewing for about a year. I'm going based on forecasting. And I could tell you, the upside is way more than the downside of elevating this guy and giving him something. Put the IC title on him. Put the US title on him. Something.
I mean, it feels like the US title is within his grasp. I know that they have to play out the Brawling Brutes and Austin Theory Pretty Deadly thing, which I know a lot of people have different views on, and I kind of fall into line with that. It's a weird 6-person tag to do. But anyway, you've got 4 weeks until SummerSlam. It'll probably get announced 2 weeks out. Finish that Brawling Brute story with Austin Theory, and then Theory will be like, I beat everyone. No one's on my level. And LA Knight comes out and says, yeah. And then we have a US title match for SummerSlam. Do that. Why not? Simple, easy.
I was just, overall for that show, for a Garden show, to do a 35-minute opening segment, just promo, it's ballsy, and it worked. And it's funny because that was a risk. And speaking to people there, at WWE while I was in the building, they realized that this was a risk. It could have either gone terribly wrong with the crowd rejecting this, or it got the reaction that it did. And, that building was interesting because they were reacting, but they were watching more than they were chanting. And I don't know how it came off on TV in that opening segment, if the crowd was loud or engaged, but they were, you look, I had the balcony view so I could see everybody. And I had those theater glasses, so I was zooming in on everybody's face. I could do one of these, and I could see everybody's face. Everybody was shockingly watching. They wanted to see what was going to happen next, and that doesn't really align for them too often. Either they reject it or they fall asleep. And they were into it. They wanted it all night. And then at the end, they got Edge wrestling, which was a big surprise to everybody. And then they finished off with Roman again. And it was a fascinatingly paced show. I've never been to a live wrestling show where it was the way that it was presented. Again, it felt like theater. It didn't feel like a pro wrestling show, which is fine. Look at what we see. I did one of those. But it was awesome.
Waldorf over here.
Yeah. And Mike Johnson screaming about the 86 Mets behind me. It was fantastic.
Joel can speak to this as well, but the crowd at portions of it was low, and then you could tell like they turned up the volume on the crowd. They had to mute. Yeah. Early on when the "you got pinned" chant that they were chanting at Roman, that was very low to start the segment, and then all of a sudden it just grew a little bit louder. It's like, I don't think like more people chanted. I think they realized, let's turn the volume up on the crowd a little bit.
Also what they did, they dimmed the crowd because of the chants.
Yeah, they had to mute the crowd because they were chanting "you effed up" and things like that, and so they had to mute the crowd. And then when Roman started talking again, they had to turn the crowd down so Roman could speak, and you didn't actually miss any of the dialogue on this. But the crowd seemed very hot, very interested for it. It definitely didn't, watching it at home, it didn't feel like this is just dying with the crowd. It was, they were either into it, chanting stuff, or they were being attentive, like you said.
Yeah, I thought they did a great job. Now, I mean, did you guys feel it was a really good show or no? Watching it at home,
it worked in that it I don't want to say it flew by, but it certainly paced itself in a way that I was like, oh, okay, we're done. But I also feel like the show was so bloodline heavy that everything else kind of didn't exist. I was talking to Kate last night, and my feeling with the LA Knight thing, by the way, was that WWE loves to do a 2.5 things that you remember per show. And putting LA Knight on the show where it was Bloodline was number 1 and 2, and then the half was Grayson Waller and Edge. Like, that was, putting him on the show would have been detrimental to LA Knight's kind of focus. And I think if you bring him in next week and he becomes number 1 or 2 focus on the show, then you're kind of telling the people he's important. If they brought him in this week, it would have been like, here he is, big cheer, and then that's it. Bringing him out in front of the crowd was smart. But the show itself, watching it on TV, I thought it was paced in a way that it felt good. I don't think it really dragged too long with the opening segments. And then the matches themselves were just kind of there, and that was okay. Edge and Waller, really good match. Setup was fine. Glad that Waller is now wrestling a match instead of just talking for 15 minutes.
He had a broken leg. leg.
I get that. But my point is I'm legitimately happy to watch him wrestle instead of doing a 15-minute segment that could not go anywhere at the time because he was injured.
Right.
Yeah. It's also really interesting because like the fandom, right? Like seeing who people react to. Like I'm almost 40. So I'm an in-between generation of what's watching right now. Mostly the people that were there in that crowd, even with their kids, were people that grew up in that 2000s period, that were watching in that 2000s. So Edge obviously is a big deal for them. Like when you have these returns, like it's now shifting, like Randy Orton, right? Randy, Edge, like that generation is now bringing their families. It's not the Hulk Hogan generation that I grew up on and the Ultimate Warrior generation. So it's interesting to see how the crowd is changing. And the reaction to things is changing. It was really, every time I go, I love people watching because you kind of get a gauge of where things are headed. And, like the legends, like we talk about bringing up legends, like Edge is one of those, but Edge is 47 years old now. Edge is not going to be doing this too much moving forward. But who's that next generation that will? Who are the next generation of 40-year-olds that you're going to see? They're wrestling. They never stopped. Like Samoa Joe, he's in his 40s. AJ Styles is 44. Damian Priest is 40. LA Knight is 40. We grew up on this generation. We're like, oh crap, you're 38 years old. Remember, we saw John Cena's turning 38. Is his career ending soon?
Yeah.
You know, but now these guys are more active. So I'm curious, like, who's going to be that next generation that brings a big pop when they return? I don't know. I don't think these guys ever stop now. So I think it's just going to be a transitional thing. You know, they'll appear every now and then. I think a lot of people also thought Bray was showing up. I don't know why.
There was also the Carlito rumor that people were.
And the Carlito rumor. Yeah, I got asked that. I mean, not that I'm saying I got stopped in the streets and people were, you know, clamoring to ask me a question, but I got stopped. And people were like, do you know if Carlito's here? Do you know if, but overwhelmingly people were asking me about Bray.
I didn't hear.
I don't know.
I didn't hear anything about Bray.
Carlito
was a big thing. I think PW Insider even like said like this was the plan, and obviously plans can change and stuff. But they said a couple weeks ago that Carlito was planned for like the MSG show. That was the.
How do you not bring out Carlito at MSG? It's a huge market for him. You know, first of all, it's a great market to bring him back, right? To begin with, but I mean, we have a huge Puerto Rican population here, dude. LWO shirts up the wazoo, unbelievable to see. So many LWO shirts. It is over. I mean, it's New York, so of course it's going to be over here. I don't know in like you know, Plymouth, Montana, how over the LWO is going to be, but in New York City, it's very over.
So just before,
is that a place? Is Plymouth, Montana a place?
Let's you.
All right, you look it up, and I'm going to tell you. Okay, we're going to start to wind down here. The Sphere in Vegas. That was a topic of conversation for many reasons. We've mentioned it on the show, and I saw that the F4W threads are starting to talk about the possibility of running the Sphere. You want to talk about that? The MSG.
I got some insight on that. 100%, they're going to run the Sphere.
Yeah.
It just depends on when they want to run the Sphere, and MSG very much wants them to run the Sphere. It's going to be a hot attraction venue. Every hot act that you could imagine is going to want to run that building. It's wild. I don't know. I mean, what would they do for WWE? You know, would they present it on the Sphere? Would they do something cool? Yeah. I don't know, but
absolutely, you would.
Yeah, wasn't that Sphere going to be for e-gaming only? Remember that?
See, I don't remember. I just remember you two being like, "We want in first, and we'll pay whatever we need to get there." And they're gonna.
Yeah,
there's some cool stuff in there.
Yeah, MSG is doing some interesting things. I know a lot of the people there, but WWE 100%. I expect them to run the Sphere. I don't know if it's going to be 2024, but it's in the plan. I mean, how do you not run that venue? It's a very unique venue, and it's an automatic sellout. You run the Sphere. Yeah. Not only do you have the push from the Venetian that's going to comp half your freaking tickets, that building is going to be 100% at occupancy because you got the Las Vegas, you know, push for the hotels.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that venue get run for wrestling because someone was going to do it. I talked to Mark Hoke, who lives in Vegas and was at Double or Nothing, and we talked about the Sphere on the show, and I was like, someone's going to run that venue. And if it's not Tony, who at the time didn't know about the Sphere, it's going to be WWE because they have the relationship with the Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I don't know if they could get in that building, if AEW could get in that Sphere. It's a Garden connection, you know?
Right.
We know how that works.
Yeah. But they're happy to run T-Mobile or Modelo or any of those local, you know, hotel adjacent. MGM, they could potentially work there again. But yeah, anyway, just wanted to bring it up.
Joel, I know you have another guest at 10:30, but I have a question. What the hell's going on with AEW in Canada? Why can't they sell tickets over there?
Well, you see, when you go
tell me, educate me.
When you go to places like Hamilton, Hamilton's like going to Queens.
Okay, burying Canada.
Excuse me.
No.
Excuse me. We sold that Arthur Ashe.
You're right. Hamilton's like going to Brooklyn. Okay.
Thank you.
After you nights earlier. You know, I think a lot of just quick succession, and then going to Regina was a choice. I have a friend who was there, and she had a great time. Like, she was just excited to be there. Show was fun. The people obviously had fun there, but they couldn't move tickets because Regina is not. First of all, it's not Stampede country, and I know people push back on me about this. Kevin Kelly all night being like, Stampede country, Stampede. Like, it's the Calgary Stampede. It's not Stampede wrestling country. Sure, that's where they used to do the loops, but Regina is not a hotbed for wrestling. It's not a hotbed for anything, quite frankly. Sorry, friends in Regina.
Jeez.
It's just not.
So aggressive about Regina.
I know.
I called it Regina, Saskatchewan, and Lance Storm immediately berated me.
Good.
On text. He started yelling at me. He goes, "It's not Regina, it's Regina."
You thought it was Regina Spektor, Regina, Saskatchewan.
Regina. Yeah, Regina.
But anyway.
I don't know the Canadian affect. You know?
But then they're gonna run Calgary this coming Saturday, and I anticipate a good turnout for that. But also, the Saddle Dome is a massive venue, and again, it is the Stampede Week. Like, you want to know how big Stampede Week is? My wife works for a Calgary nonprofit. I'm not gonna dox whatever. I'm not gonna say, but they closed for Stampede. Like,
Wow.
and they have no association to this stuff, but they are closed for Stampede.
That's interesting. So did you see that the walk-ups were a lot more for the show? Is that a common thing? Would you expect more walk-ups for the Calgary show?
I wouldn't be surprised because, like Madison Square Garden, it's a thing to do in a major city on a Saturday night. So I wouldn't be shocked. And it's also, the venue is across from Hitman's bar. So if they're smart, they'll do something as a tie-in with that bar, or they'll at least tell you, like, go to Brett's bar after the show, we'll give you a drink, or do something. Just get people there. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have a few walk-ups for that show.
Interesting. No, I was curious. It's a long trip too. You know, it's a lot of. I understand why they did it, but I'm looking forward to them leaving your home country.
Boy, howdy, me too. And then they come back in December to go to Montreal if you're listening to Pat LaPrade. And like,
but that's not part of Canada, right? They're their own thing. Yeah, they want to leave. I get it.
Yeah, again, it's like the Florida thing with the Bugs Bunny wanting to chop it up. We want to do that to Quebec all the time. But if they go to Montreal in the middle of December when it's cold and icy, I don't know what wrestling companies think this is a good idea for, because WWE did that with the Elimination Chamber, and I cursed it the whole way through. It's cold, it's snowy, and gross.
Did you go?
Yeah, I was there in press. It sucked for the show was great. The getting two places sucked because it was snowy and gross and cold.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Yeah, see, the Garden for me is so convenient because Penn Station is underneath the Garden. So I'm at the Garden every day. There are times that I'll go to a Rangers game, I just go up to the bar. I don't even make it. I go upstairs and I go into their like VIP bar area and I just have a couple cocktails and I get back downstairs and I go on the train. I don't even go in the actual building.
Yeah, you just watch the game in the venue. That's it.
Also, fun fact, the Garden is on the 5th floor of the Garden. I don't know if you guys know that. It's not on the floor. It's on the 5th floor, everything. Little fun fact.
Here we go. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I'll see you guys. I'll be back next week or later this week. I know you guys do this a couple times. I'll hijack you guys for another 25 minutes.
He just pops in. He's never scheduled. He just shows up.
Someone gave him the
I like it. I see you guys are live. I'm like, I gotta see Jeremy. Forget about Joel.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm only here for you, not him.
Thanks, buddy.
Goodbye, guys.
Take
Bye,
care.
Andrew.
Thank you.